on? Yeah, if you give like 500, Ash, maybe. Better sleep with one.
Ladies, gentlemen, and friends beyond the binary, welcome to the Monday Discourse for today, September 27th, 2021. I'm your host, Tristan, and yes, I am in a new office. Please remain calm. The office that I have been using since I moved into this new house is being turned into a baby bedroom, so this is my new office now. It's actually a little bit bigger, so it's all good. But yes, new environment though, so get used to that. My name's Tristan, and I host the channel Step Back History, the one that's got that little play button right there. And I stream on Mondays and Tuesdays. Mondays from 12 till 2 Eastern, and then on Tuesdays from 7 till 9 Eastern. Although I do have a programming note today, and I'll probably have to mention this several times because it takes a while for things to get out to everybody who needs it to get out to. But there's going to be some interruptions to our streaming schedule over the next couple weeks. Specifically, tomorrow's stream is not going to happen. I have in-laws visiting, so I'm not going to be streaming on Tuesday night. And also next week, I'm going to be in Toronto on business, so I will not be streaming on. I will not be streaming next week at all. Following that, the following Monday, the 11th, is Thanksgiving here in Canada. So I'll be taking that day off, and so we will return to streaming on October 12th after this stream. So I know that that's a lot, but my next few weeks are very, very busy, and I've got a lot going on. So I apologize for the lack of entertainment for a little while, but I will be back on the 12th, and then we're also going to do a Thursday stream on the 14th to kind of make up for the holiday. So yeah, that's life, isn't it? It's a big scanner right there. It's also a printer. You like the wooden doors in the background? Well, that's great. The wooden door was... I had a wooden door in the office, too. It's an old house, and it came with it. Yeah. You can find my work at stepbackhistory.com, and if you wish to support my work financially, for as little as 84 cents a month with a yearly subscription, you can go to patreon.com/stepbackhistory and get videos early without any sponsorships. Furthermore... you could, if you are, it's still September. This is my last September stream, so if it is September for you, or you can subscribe for a discounted price right now on Amazon. On top of that, if you have Amazon Prime, you can do one free Twitch Prime subscription per month, and if you choose Step Back, I get money, and you pay nothing because it's baked into your Twitch Prime subscription, so or Amazon Prime subscription. So if you want to do that, I'd be very grateful. Of course, it's not mandatory, and I just hope that you use it because it is just free money for a creator that you like. And of course, super chats, bits, and Twitch subscriptions are always welcome. And as far as content goes, I've got my latest video on conspiracy theories. It's been out for a little bit now. Seems to be going down really well. It seems to be really popular. People seem to like it. My next video coming out in... I thought it would be near the end of October, but I'm kind of already done the video. Well, I've written it. I'm going to be recording it today and editing it. And I have a bunch of freelancing coming up, so I probably will be, inshallah, I'll be finishing it this week. And it'll be out for patrons in the next couple days. But it'll be out for everyone sometime in the next little bit. I'm traveling and there's all sorts of stuff going on, so I don't know, things will get delayed, but yeah, there's a video. October's video is going to be showing up closer to the beginning than the end of October, I guess is what we should be saying, or the middle, I should say, actually. Yeah, and if you have any questions for future streams, possibly this stream, we'll see. I will put a link in the chat for a website you can go to submit questions. And yeah. And if there's any new folks here, please make yourself known in the chat because this is a very wonderful and very supportive community. So please make yourself known. Say hello. We would love to say hello back. All right. I think that is all of the opening, spiel. So, what internet did I miss this week? I have been far too in my own world for the last couple weeks. So, there was my election last week, but that's already happened. I already talked about that on Tuesday. Let's see. Does anyone else hate writing in cursive? Well, I do not. I actually, my writing is unintelligible, printing or cursing. So I use cursive to write faster. I guess I could also turn on the fan. Come on, fan. There we go. Hopefully that's not too loud. All right. So we got any other good internet going on? Anne Marie stepping down as the Green leader. That is not surprising. She was almost kicked out as Green leader this year. So yeah, the idea that that is not a surprise. Anne Marie Paul was very divisive in a party that is that has quite a bit of what's it called? Quite a bit of ideological incoherence. And yeah, how many screens do I have on? 2. I have 2 computer screens. Someone said that they they can't remember the last time they've written something by hand. Well, I do bullet journaling, so to keep track of everything. So this little bookie here has got all of my, got a lot of my handwriting in it. Yeah. Alrighty. Bullet journaling, yeah. I use it to just at a quick glance at the beginning of the day, keep track of everything that I have going on. So, I don't do a lot of the fancy stuff with it. I have a little gratitude journal, and I have like a little thing that I have to write. BT Dubs, have you been enjoying the book I sent? I have not cracked it open yet, I'm embarrassed to say, because I am reading a book very slowly, and I'm almost done. And then once that book is done, then I'm going to be opening it up. But I have been reading this novel for like months and months and months that I need to finish first. Once it is finished, I'll pick it up. But yeah, it's on my list. Yeah. So what we got for questions today? We got, what was that? Okay. I'm gonna just mute my thing for a little bit. Go. Alrighty. Okay. So let's take a look at what we got. Have you seen anything that points to Havana syndrome being a real thing? Congress just passed an act to aid the supposed victims of it. I mean, it seems like, Morgellons for the intelligence community. So no, I'm not particularly convinced that that Havana syndrome is anything more than a way to try and convince Congress to give the intelligence industry even more money than they already get. Because, yeah. Apparently, all the money is not enough. So, yeah. Thoughts on the SDP victory in Germany? I mean, I know that like Angela Merkel no longer being chancellor is going to be like a pretty big deal, and everyone's going to have a lot of like concerns about that. I don't exactly know too much about the SDP. I think they're the Social Democrats, right? And I'm like, I would think that might be better than the Christian Democrats, but I honestly couldn't tell you. And I don't have Mia here to give me the runabout on what European politics is all about, so I don't really know what to I don't know what to say. My guess is that they're not as good as they could have been, as German leftists would want. But if the SDP was ruling here in Canada, it would be far to the left of anything that we have normally here. So, The leader of the SDP is part of the right-wing faction. Oh, that's fun. Have you told the cats about the baby? Yeah, I'm interested to see how they react to the baby. I would like to see the baby. As far as I know, the cats are pretty friendly, so I'm hoping that everything will be okay. It's not SDP, it's SPD. Oh. Okay. The left got absolutely obliterated. Well, that's not good. Yeah, I don't know what's going on in Germany. Again, we'll see what happens. But Japan has elections next month. Do I have thoughts on that? I couldn't even tell you the first thing about what's going on in the Japanese elections. I imagine that people are pretty pissed off about the Olympics and about COVID because Japan kind of fucked up COVID pretty bad this year. So I imagine that they're getting there. All right. Where is Mia? She's not here today. She's having not feeling well, so taking a health day to feel better. My last video, I might be paraphrasing, but I think you said all cryptocurrency was a scam. I think tokens that are actually backed by something are meant to serve as a store of value. I mean, all crypto is a scam because nobody actually uses them as currency. There's actually, very, very interestingly, the Gravel Institute recently made a video that more articulately made my argument for me. So, you know what? We don't have Mia today. We can kind of shake up the format. Maybe we can watch that video. Let's watch the Gravel Institute video on cryptocurrencies because it said pretty much what I wanted to say, but better. So let's get that. Let's do that. So video is called "Why Bitcoin is a Scam." I'll pause the music while we do this. Okay.
In the early 1920s, a businessman in Boston had a realization. Everybody wants to get rich without doing any work. So this businessman came up with a brilliant idea to make a lot of money. And like all good financiers, he promised to make those around him really rich too. The businessman told his investors he was buying discounted coupons in foreign countries and making money reselling them in the US. There was a middleman opportunity that he claimed was totally safe and guaranteed a return. The businessman promised his investors a 50% profit in 45 days or 100% in 90 days. What this businessman was doing was paying the people who got in early with the money for the people who got in later. Those later investors, excited by hearing about a guaranteed high return investment, were left holding the bag. That businessman was named Charles Ponzi. His name has become synonymous with these sorts of schemes. His Ponzi scheme made millions of dollars in just a few months. But such a con can only go on for so long. Eventually you run out of other people's money. And for Ponzi, when that happens, you go to jail. 100 years later, a new bunch of wealthy investors say they too have a brilliant way to make you a lot of money. They promise to make you really, really rich. The best part is, they say, the returns are guaranteed. Anyone can buy with any amount of money. It's called Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a digital token with no physical or government backing that's run by a global decentralized network of computers. These computers keep track of every Bitcoin transaction and can move Bitcoins easily from one user to another. There are a limited number of Bitcoins in the world, 21 million, 19 million of which have already been mined. These mining rigs are large systems of computers which...
Also important note on this is that while 19 million Bitcoins are all that will or how many have been made and 20 million are all that will ever exist, Also, like, the vast majority of cryptocurrencies, like, a huge percentage are owned by like one or two people. So there's like the absurd amount of inequality within these things as well.
Perform complex calculations, expending huge amounts of energy to create new bitcoins. Massive Bitcoin mining farms are set up in places like Siberia and northeastern China, where people take advantage of cheap
And also on this note, this is all, China has recently made this illegal. It was announced, I think, yesterday or the day before, but the Chinese government has announced that cryptocurrency and crypto trading is a crime in the People's Republic. So, yeah. Why only 20 million? Because it's based on a libertarian idea of wanting to create Boolean-based currency, i.e., if Bitcoin keeps itself to only 20 million ever existing and mining gets less and less efficient over time, then there is deflationary pressure on the currency, which means that each Bitcoin gets worth more and more over time as more and more people participate in the scam, but there's fewer and fewer Bitcoins to go around, which means that the people who invested early get massively rich while the new people don't. And so, yeah, deflationary pressure is not a sign of a healthy currency. It's sort of the reason why the Great Depression happened. So, yeah, it's a problem.
Electricity in massive, wasteful facilities. But how Bitcoin works doesn't really matter that much. All of the stuff you hear about peer-to-peer technology and the blockchain really only explains how Bitcoin works as a currency. But despite the name, Bitcoin isn't really used much as a currency at all. When people buy Bitcoin, they rarely use it to buy goods and services. They're really buying access to a Ponzi scheme. Only 1.3% of Bitcoin's economic activity is in merchant transactions. The rest is speculation, people buying it just because they think it will go up. And the more it's used in speculation, the less incentive people have to actually use it as a currency. Why buy something with Bitcoin when you can hold it and make some easy money? That's why the peak of Bitcoin being used to buy things was actually back in 2017, before its price really took off. And a currency should be stable in value, not bounce all over the place the way Bitcoin does. Rises are nice, but Bitcoin also falls a lot. If you want to speculate, that's fine, that's your own business. But you don't want the value of your checking account to gyrate wildly and unpredictably just because Elon Musk has tweeted about it. If you have friends or relatives who are into cryptocurrency, you know that the reason that people are into Bitcoin is because they think it can make them a lot of money. Because Bitcoin is just a digital token without any inherent value, they're not really making an investment. They're engaging in a financial betting game. Anything you invest in Bitcoin or Ethereum or Dogecoin just goes into the pocket of the previous holder. There's no real income generating asset behind it. What they're betting on is that other people will bet on it and the value will keep going up. If more people are joining the market, you can make money. You're not a sucker if the person next in line is a sucker too. And as long as you can make it out on time, the next guy is left holding the bag. The good news for these gamblers is that there are a lot of suckers in the world. The bad news is that eventually you run out of suckers. So to keep the scam running,
China banning Bitcoin or all cryptocurrencies is going to is the beginning of the end of a lot of this speculative bubble thing going on, because as people were saying, stealing electricity from the Chinese power grid was the source of a lot of Bitcoin mining, and this banning Bitcoin might be one of the easiest, quickest, and good ways to do something good for your carbon footprint in a country. Like, if any country wants to get rid of a huge amount of wasted power and, really reduce their carbon footprint, they just ban cryptocurrencies and it'd be easy to do. And it's a scam, so it all helps.
As long as they can, the wealthy proponents of Bitcoin say that it's changing the world. They say that Bitcoin is going to replace fiat currencies like the dollar. They say that it's going to undermine cruel dictatorships and greedy banks and help usher in a libertarian utopia of privacy and security. And most importantly, they say what every scam...
Someone just said here, you have to steal power to be profitable. Yeah, it's either you either have to find places where electricity is really, really, really cheap, which is really hard to find, or you have to steal it, or there's another way that people do Bitcoin mining or cryptocurrency mining, which is by installing Trojans on people's computers. So basically installing viruses on other people's computers that set up, that like basically slow down the computer and use its processing power in order to mine cryptocurrency for you. And you just create a huge botnet of computers doing that for you. So malware is another way that people are making Bitcoins. It's a really seems kind of like a healthy industry.
Artist has said since the beginning of time. Get in right now, and you'll make quick and easy money. Don't miss out on this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And for the last few years, they've actually been right. If you'd spent $100 on buying shares of Apple in January 2016, you'd have about $540 now. If you spent that $100 on Bitcoin, then you'd have made more than $9,000. But that doesn't mean that Bitcoin is working. It means that a lot of people have fallen for the scam. And the more people who buy it, the more the price fluctuates, and the less usable it is as a currency. The success of Bitcoin as a speculative commodity has made it socially useless. You'd actually have made just as much money buying a parody cryptocurrency called Dogecoin that makes none of the grandiose claims that Bitcoin does. In fact, it explicitly started as a joke. Meanwhile, as more and more people speculate on Bitcoin, it consumes more and more electricity and emits more and more carbon. Because of how complex Bitcoin transactions are, they consume an incredible amount of power. One Bitcoin transaction consumes more electricity than the average American household does in a month. Bitcoin as a whole consumes more electricity than entire countries: Venezuela, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Kazakhstan, and the Philippines. If Bitcoin ever were to be widely adopted, it would consume many times more energy than is produced in the world today. Bitcoin isn't useful at all, except maybe as a symbol of how capitalism has changed. From something that could once build factories and transcontinental railroads to a system of pure speculation, totally divorced from the real world. Look at this system. Millions of computers emitting huge amounts of carbon, making pointless calculations in order to gain access to a digital token with no actual use, all while the infrastructure crumbles and people go hungry.
It's the most capitalist thing I've ever heard.
This is a terrible way to organize a society. But because Bitcoin is a Ponzi scheme without any benefit to society, does not mean it's going away. Bitcoin has become a culture, an identity. Amid the vast meaninglessness of a society in decline, a lot of people find value in it. In a world where traditional forms of identity are in decline, family, unions, religion, new ones like cryptocurrencies spring up to take their place. The fact that so many lonely, atomized people find community and meaning in Bitcoin means that for the people at the very top, people with millions or even billions of dollars, there's a ready and willing community of suckers to exploit. You can still make money off cryptocurrencies. In an age of low wages and mass underemployment, people will always be lured by the promise of getting rich quick. But there will always be somebody left holding the bag. And it could very well be you. In essence, Bitcoin is a gamble. Gambling can be fun at low stakes with friends, but the people trying to sell you Bitcoin aren't your friends. No matter what you tell yourself, you're just gambling. Not that an asset has value, but that the person next in line is more gullible than you. This is Doug Henwood, author of Wall Street, for the Gravel Institute.
So a friggin' amazing video. Thank you, Gravel. This is the kind of reason why I'm a patron of the Gravel Institute, because they market themselves, and this is literally their mission statement. Their mission statement is to be a left-wing response to PragerU. And so far, the content they put out has been rock solid. And yeah, this came out a few months, maybe a couple months after my, or a month after my cryptocurrency video. And it's like, oh, you just did my video, but way, way better. Great minds think alike, I guess. Yeah. Did PragerU do a pro crypto video? I don't think so. I think PragerU is more into like traditionally conservative stuff, but I think it's an important issue, and that's why I'm glad they're talking about it. Still waiting on Stepcoin though. Yeah, I have. I'm not gonna lie. I have tried very hard to find a like a way to make like a reasonably priced challenge coin. Yeah, the only like way to make custom challenge coins seems to involve buying a lot of them for like a lot of money up front, and then I'd have to like sell them one at a time. But and I don't really think I have it in my budget to buy like 250 step back challenge coins to give to, I don't know, patrons or whatever. But yeah. But I did a fair amount of research trying to find a service that would make me a custom coin. Yes, new office. Correct. How much would that cost? If I remember, like, oh man, I'm trying to remember how much custom challenge coins were. Like, I think like 250 was like $700 or something in that vein. Like, each one was maybe about $3. So, like at wholesale price. So every coin was about $3, which meant that I was paying about $750 for the coin for 250 coins. Sounds like a genuine use for a Kickstarter. Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I think that there is like a service that's kind of like this, where you kind of do Kickstarter, but it's like for one specific type of merchandise. And basically, you're just buying like this one run, and then once like it's all sold, then it's done. But I can't remember what it's called. It's like Redbubble maybe or something like that. Is that what Redbubble is, or Mass Drop? Redbubble is merch. Yeah, it's just like a regular print-on-demand place. And no print-on-demand place is making coins. I've looked for that, too. So, yeah. Has Phoebe claimed this office as her own yet? A little bit. She does hang out on my desk quite a bit. She's not here now. But, probably can't see, but, like, over in this direction... This is a bit of a mess. I apologize because I'm still moving stuff. But I put the cat tower there by the window. So that cat tower is hopefully going to be a place that she hangs out in. And this office overlooks the backyard instead of the side of the house, which is right beside an apartment, like a small apartment block. So now my window looks out and I see a tree and my backyard, and I don't see a brick wall. So that's nice. And now, like, with the window open, I can hear birds. It's all really good. I'm pretty happy. All right. Whew. So I answered that question about Havana syndrome and how I think that it might be just a scheme to increase the budget of intelligence operations. But feels like you have a brother printer. I do have a brother printer. Good catch. Yeah. All right. We have rear window adventure. Oh boy. Okay, let's see what we got for next question. My friend was explaining about how bad socialism is by using the example of a teacher grading all the students, averaging out the grades of all of them, and saying that the one not doing anything would get the same as the one who worked hardest. Okay. For some reason, I couldn't think of anything to say. Sadly, I don't think or talk fast enough, but I knew something was wrong with that example. What could you say about the illustration? How would you explain socialism to her? Okay. So, First of all, this shows this is a very common like sort of way of talking about anti-communist rhetoric in and sort of like anti-Cold War, like Cold War rhetoric. This is basically how communism was described to me by my parents when I was a kid. So I understand this whole thing. My mom explained it to me as like, isn't it terrible the idea that like the janitor is paid the exact same amount as a doctor? Isn't that terrible? And it's like, okay, sure. But I would say that like let's look at this example of like how does a socialist mark class? So the whole like thing about how socialism like doesn't encourage people to innovate, or it encourages mediocrity, because if you are amazing, then you can't there's no way for you to move up in a socialist society, so why bother? First of all, that's not necessarily true. There are as many ways to move up in a socialist society, and there are ways to be compensated for prestigious careers and things and for ambition that aren't just measured by money. Like if I remember correctly, the Soviet Union used to do things like have awards for its most productive workers, and there's all sorts of really cool things that they would do. So if it's all about just being properly recognized, then sure. But the thing though is that grades, there's a question of stakes here too. Like this, imagine if this test existed, and if it was capitalist, then the people who got the highest marks would be given an outrageous amount of money. And the people who did poorly on one test, this is a good way to do it. Imagine a class where one test is 100% of your final mark. And there's a reason why we don't do that. So the people who had one really good test, maybe they had a really good breakfast that day. Maybe they studied just the right things. Maybe they were in the right corner. Maybe they had their favorite pencil. The people who did really, really well, and there are a lot of ways that they could have earned that, but there are also a lot of ways that's just luck, get to have 100% in the class, But say you did poorly in the class, not because you didn't study, you studied a ton. Not because you are lazy, you worked your ass off studying. But say you had some sort of disability, or you had some sort of, you had a family situation at home that was very complicated and made it so it was hard to get a lot of productive studying time in. Say, you worked you were in a lower class family and you had to work part-time on top of that. All of those factors coming in together means that you don't do as well as you could have if you had every opportunity on one test that is your entire grade for this class, and all of a sudden you are ranked lower on the grade curve than the people at the top. Then imagine that your mark in this class determines whether or not you have the physical objects that you need to live. Like if your performance on this one test determines whether or not you get to live in a house versus get to live in an apartment versus not get to live anywhere, whether or not you get food, whether or not you get education, whether or not all those things. And then imagine that would then inform how you would perform on the next test in the next class, because your life situation would either be drastically improved or it would be drastically downgraded. And you can already see that you're creating a stratus of people who could have some talent, but also could very likely just be lucky, compounding upon those things and ending up with way more of a prestigious life than they deserve. Same goes for people who have a less, who through one reason or another, either they are not either bad luck, bad life situation, any sort of thing will also have negative compounding problems going forward. Furthermore, imagine if the test for that class was sheerly on your ability to make other people money. There are many ways that people contribute to our world that are not easily monetizable. And there are some that are more monetizable than others. And in my mind, we are learning very quickly that determining somebody's value in the world based on how much money they can make people is not exactly a proxy for a vibrant and growing economy. If anything, it is a recipe for these intractable problems. You know, the fact that you can't shut down the economy even for a short amount of time to deal with a pandemic. The fact that you can't find a way to transition off of fossil fuels because you can't make it more profitable than the way that you're doing it now. There's a growing gap between what's beneficial for the world and what's profitable. Yeah. And then also, don't forget that a lot of success is just based on, exploitation. But that's, so in my mind, it's one thing when you're talking about grades, but it's not a really perfect analogy. Because in our society, there are a lot more factors to how you do well in society than whether or not you worked hard enough at the right things. Second of all, the things that we measure for in society, in our economy, as opposed to a school class, are not exactly conducive to a good society. And third, circumstance is far more likely the culprit for somebody performing well or poorly in our capitalist economy than, personal ambition. And so, that's why capitalism is... capitalism creates a facade of a meritocracy, but it is not really the case. Anybody can tell. Socialism does put everybody on equal footing, but that's because we live in an economy. We live in an unfair world, and it would be unjust. It would be unethical to use the circumstances of someone's birth, or even the people's abilities, a person's ability to contribute to the economy as the thing that determines whether or not they are able to make, whether or not they're able to afford the essentials of life. Furthermore, there is some really great studies on specifically ambition and motivation itself, and the idea that big monetary rewards, that money and profit is the best motivation for people, is actually not true. The two factors that cause people to be the most innovative and the most ambitious is, one, not being concerned about your day-to-day living, and two, having autonomy over whatever it is that you're working on. There was this wonderful study that happened in, I believe it was Google. So Google had a sort of innovation reward. So if you found a bug fix, or if you did a bug fix, or you thought of a new product, or you came up with some sort of radical new contribution, that you would get a reward for a few $1,000s. And that worked fine for a while. But then looking at this data, one of the things that Google did is instead of giving people a reward, what they did is one day a week, I believe it was Fridays, they said to their developers, their coders or whatever, that they could, for Fridays, work on anything that they wanted, and that they could they had free reign to work on whatever it is that they wanted to do. And if you look at the result of that, the productivity and the amount of like new products and bug fixes that came out of this change was so much more than the financial incentive system. And actually, there's a lot of stuff that shows that if you pay somebody to do a task, their motivation to do it actually goes down, paradoxically. Because they're moving from an intrinsic motivation to an extrinsic motivation, i.e., they're doing it for the reward, not because they want to do the thing. And that is that also really takes the sails out of this idea that, you know, without financial incentive, people would have no motivation to do anything. Soviet Union even had many, like, you know, brilliant inventors and really amazing inventions. Like, you know, the Soviets had a very successful space program that beat the United States to many major technical achievements. The Soviet Union had, you know, they invented one of the most used weapons in human history. There was a period where its kind of bureaucratic machinery sort of started to really, like, you know, drag things down, but it's not like the Soviets were hurting for innovation and new ideas. So. Hope, Heidi, that answers your question. I don't even know if Heidi's here. Oh. I think it's also because people aren't actually compensated for the value of their work fairly. Yeah, that there was sort of a lifting of the veil there, where as a promotion, or as like a little like promotional gag, there was a pizza place where they hired their employee. They for like a one-day thing, they paid their employees the entirety of what they were worth. Like, they did not do any. They gave them, like, you know, if you sold, you know, if you made $100 worth of pizza, you got $100. You know, aside from like taking away materials and stuff like that, none of the taking away money for profit was done. And these people who made pizzas were raking in $75 an hour. So, just shows like just how much the exploitation is, you know. So that's my thing. Next question I got here is also from Heidi. Or no, we should do a different one. We got to balance these out now. We've got lots of questions. So Jenny, did you hear about the guy who sued an abortion doctor in Texas? I heard the guy sued doesn't even live in Texas. I did hear that too. It's some like scammy lawyer from like Alabama or something. So, suppose the NDP were able to form a minority government. Would you be pleased, even though minority government are kind of undemocratic? I don't think that they're undemocratic. If anything, I think they're more democratic than majority governments, because when you have a minority government in Canada, it means that you can't pass any bills without getting votes from a different party. Like, you can't, when you have a majority government, it means that you can pass basically laws without any consideration of the other party. It's just straight on party lines. As long as you got your party voting for it, you can pass whatever you want. Which means that if you've got like, I think like the last majority government had like 39% of the popular vote, it means that 39% of people had 100% control of the government. A minority government doesn't have that problem. minority government has to work with somebody to pass anything. So, and there's a lot of evidence that shows that bills passed during minority governments have a lot more staying power than a lot of other countries, or a lot of other, like, than bills passed during majority governments. And in Canada specifically, this is a big deal because we have this terrible problem in Canada where because we don't do because coalition governments are unheard of. I think there's like only been like one in Canadian history or something crazy like that. But during these minority, like majority governments have been the norm for a good chunk of our history. That every time a majority government is in place, they pass a whole slew of laws, and then the next party will come into power, and they'll pass a whole slew of laws that basically undoes all the laws before. And you end up with situations like when my wife was trying to become a citizen. She was trying to navigate through the Stephen Harper immigration system, which had been changed from like the Paul Martin immigration system, which had been changed from the Jean Chrétien immigration system, which had been changed by the Brian Mulroney immigration system, because like every time the government really changed hands, there was just like they would just overhaul all the laws. And for example, Stephen Harper, one of his first big things with the majority government was he passed this this justice omnibus law that just changed our entire legal system and added things like mandatory minimum sentences. And then I think when the Liberals took over, they just rewrite all of it. And this is not a recipe for a stable government. So yeah. Minority governments are unstable, though. That is true. When we have minority governments, we end up basically having an election about every other year. But at the same time, they are more democratic. And the question was, doesn't it feel undemocratic to have to govern with a minority government? So that's something to consider. And for the future, I'm going to need a reflector here or something, because this is a dramatic shadow. Because I don't have room anymore. I used to have a little lamp on this side to kind of be like a fill light for my shadow, so it didn't look like I was being super dramatic. But I don't have that anymore, so I'm going to have to get another one. I'll have to figure out some... I have a reflector. I could probably put that up. What is gratitude journaling? Gratitude journaling is just a thing where every day I write 3 things that I'm grateful for as a way to sort of help some cognitive reframing, so I try to think positively before thinking negatively. It's supposed to be like a kind of mental health thing. So every day I try to think of 3 things that I'm grateful for in the morning as a way to kind of set the day off and get my thinking in the right sort of frame. It's kind of like a positive affirmation or whatever. The more that you, knowing that you have to think of a thing that you're grateful for every day makes you grateful for more things. So yeah. Phoebe better be in there often. Yeah. Right now she's been hanging out a lot on my bed, so she'd have to get in here. Would have to become more desirable than the bed, which is a very comfy bed. Is it weird if I have multiple journals for different intentions? No. Is it good to be grateful like you're entitled to enjoy a pleasurable life? It's not so much like a entitlement thing. It's just about thinking about things through that lens. It's just it's better to think about, because like, and a lot of times, you know, our world is very much like, you know, lacking in the things that people do, you know, should have. It's good to at least try to think about all of the good things you have in your life as well. It's a sort of like a resiliency thing. And like, you know, I don't mean to like brag or anything like that, but I think I have a fairly good feeling of like, you know, psychological resiliency. And I don't think that it's entirely because of this gratitude journaling, but I think that the kind of things that cause me to do that kind of thing are in the same vein. Or it helps you know, get you, at least like in a little way, get you thinking in a more positive way. Which, you know, when you have to read about genocide and you have people, you know, saying that they wish that they could beat the shit out of you in your comments every day, is a good thing to do. Let's see. Were you ever disillusioned with academic during a time in academia, undergrad, getting doctorate? I don't know what that means. Was I ever disillusioned? Like, was I ever disillusioned? Dissolution. I don't. The verb isn't making any sense to me. So Joshua D, if you're in the chat, please fill me in on what you're trying to say in this question. You choose reproduction. You can always choose more cheery subjects to cover. This is true. Gratitude journaling is bourgeoisie decadence. Are we really doing this? I do like one thing to help my mental health every day, and everyone's on my ass about it. Jeez. Doesn't like motivate you to be satisfied with your lot under capitalism, though. That's what worried me when I encountered the idea. No. I mean, it hasn't yet. And I've been doing it now for probably like 3 years. A little bit over 3 years. It's just a thing that I think it's just a way for me to feel a little bit better about, you know, about life in general. So even, you know, when you're going through shit times, you can at least be like, well, these 3 things happened today, so that feels good. Maybe they're asking if you're a statist once and are now an anarchist or something. I don't know. As a therapist, I'm all for gratitude journaling. Yeah. Approaching, and also, like, the thing is, like, if you think about it, there's, like, an anarchist way of thinking about gratitude. Like, the sort of, like, all belongs to all thing of like, Kropotkin's idea of, like, how really there's no such thing as ownership in a real fashion that makes any sense. And that is, like, you have to kind of think about one of the reasons why property doesn't make any sense is because everybody in the world exists because of an intangible debt created by many, many generations before you that labored to create the world that you now live in. So, like, if anything, like, that kind of, like, Grabarian debt type thinking is also a sort of sense of indebtedness and gratitude for all that, you know, the countless billions of people have, the work they've done to put me in the place where I am now. It's just that PragerU has a big emphasis on that you can solve problems by just having more gratitude. Well, that's bullshit. you're disillusioned with the value of academic history work. I mean, I wrote about wanting to be a public history communicator in my my PhD application, so it was always something I wanted to do. And I started Step Back in the first year of my PhD, but before that, I was a YouTuber before then. I don't. The thing about me is that I don't think I ever had high ambitions for an academic career. I know that sounds really weird considering that I was in a PhD, but I never, like, the thing about, like, I knew going into a PhD program that I was going into a career path that is absurdly competitive, and that if I was going to break into it, I would have to, like, I know the kind of people who break into academia and become the tenured professors, and they're not me. It was never me. I never, and in order to try to get to that position, I would have had to do years and years of adjunct faculty work and trying to write books that nobody read and contribute to a field that 7 people care about. And that was never a thing that I was super into. And so even when I was doing a PhD, I never had an intention of becoming like an academic historian. That was never in the cards for me. That was not a hamster wheel I wanted to run on. So really, anyways, my like end of me, like my leaving my PhD program was more me just realizing that there was no point to me doing this and spending all of this energy on something that wasn't building my career, nor was it really making me happy. And so at that point, I was just doing my PhD to make like my mom happy, which I don't know about you guys, but very rarely is that should that be the motivating reason for your entire career. So, yeah. But like everyone knows, that academia is like a famously difficult thing to break into, especially in the humanities, where, you know, most departments that are not STEM are getting their budgets cut year on year. So, like, I still predict that we're a few decades away from a lot of universities not even having history departments because they don't make money. And everyone's telling their parents to not get history degrees, or telling their kids to not get history degrees. So just enrollment is going down year on year in a lot of like humanities-based programs. So my guess, and also, you know, all of the emphasis is on STEM fields. And so that I see a future where there probably won't be humanities departments in a lot of universities, and that philosophy and history and all that kind of thing will be more of a not a professional thing. It'll be a thing for hobbyists because they're not profitable, and universities are becoming more and more concerned about making sure that each of their departments are profitable and setting people up in order to go to careers that are lucrative. So is that decline in the humanities more of a North America problem? Probably. Aside from, like, Ivy League and Oxford, maybe. Yeah. But, like, my university, like, I've watched, like, our history department get, like, its budget cut over and over again. And, you know, they have full tenured professors are retiring, and they're just not replacing them with anybody new. Or they're replacing them with these adjunct faculty who are not paid to do research. They are just contract workers who teach classes. And it could be that they'll have like humanities departments that are just contracted teachers they're not given money to go on sabbatical to write books or do research. They're just teachers, and they're paid much less. They don't get any benefits, and they are just teaching a few of the history electives that the important departments like business and science and engineering and medicine, that those people are taking. Is that bad for humanity if people aren't studying and stuff like that? I think so. I think the reason why so many people are falling for bad, like, you know, like so many people have such bad media literacy, why people fall for tyrants and those kinds of things, has to do with the fact that we don't really have much respect for the humanities education. And that learning how to be a critical thinker and somebody who assesses the world that we live in and look at the systems that govern our lives, the fact that that is no longer considered a viable thing to study is having an impact, I think. And that our society is furthermore, like, you know, because university sort of shapes what we value and things like that. And so I think this furthermore just reinforces this concept that the only thing that's valuable to learn about is things that you can use to make money. And so that's depressing. Alrighty, let's see what we got next. How were some South American countries able to have social democracies in the 2000s? Typically, they did so at the despite the best efforts of the United States. Like Hugo Chavez, for example, had I think over a dozen coup attempts by the CIA. So, yeah, it's not like the U.S. hasn't put a lot of pressure on trying to stop popular movements, that's for sure. Is this the start or end? Actually, Lucky Otter, you're almost exactly in the middle. History was funded because it served as a tool to create nationalistic narratives to stir up the masses to support the state. Once historians challenge this narrative, they sign their death sentence. Yeah. Ooh. Yeah. So, and the other thing too is that, for example, another thing about the whole financializing of the university is when you are a grad student and you get a research grant. So this is one of the big things about academic work that doesn't get a whole lot of attention if you're not in academia, which is that your value to a lot of the school and the department and your sort of prestige as an academic is very heavily dependent on how much grant money you can bring in. And so your ability to write grants and your ability to bring money into the department is a huge deal, because universities and departments usually take a certain cut of whatever grant money you make. And, if you're a scientist, if you're a biomedical researcher and you're able to pull in $27 million grants for diabetes research or whatever, then that's one thing. The university fucking loves that. But if you're like me trying to apply for, SHIRK, the Social Sciences and Humanities Research thing, which every grad student was applying for, if you're SHIRK funded, then you're in the upper tier of the grad students in the department, and if you can get even so, the amount of grant money that historians and philosophers and stuff can bring in compared to those who are working on how to make a more efficient solar panel or how to cure disease or something like that is it's not even close. tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars compared to like tens of millions of dollars. So it is, it's just like there's no profit in, and so the only profit in having like humanities departments, if you think about how, because most universities are now turning into like for-profit operations, that the only real profit in having humanities departments is that they are interesting to some students. And enrollment's going down in that area as well because, people are, hearing from a young age, don't get a philosophy degree, it's pointless, why would you do that? And so, by and large, university enrollment for humanities programs is going down overall. And that results in less money, that results in less staff, and that results in fewer grad students, and it's sort of like a cycle as it goes down. Is it bad for the left if people aren't studying the humanities? I think so. Would you be open to, or have you done any videos about academic grading system, testing system, how it puts down neurodivergent, poor, disabled, marginalized students? Swamp Goth, yes, I actually have made a video on that subject. Let me get a link for you. Yeah, I made a video on the Prussian school system. Let me see if I can find it. It's called Why Bad Grades Don't Mean You're Stupid. I made it back in 2018. So there's a link I'll put in the chat there for you. All right, let's see what the next question we got here is. It's a Matt Lipton. All right, let's see what this is. I found out via a friend, one of my professors from a few years back was backing the PPC this year. I remember she taught one of our communications classes, but mostly wasted our time with Myers-Briggs personality test nonsense before leaving halfway through the semester. Does it make sense someone leaning right would obsess over personality tests, or is that my own personality? Is that my own bias talking? I mean, it does mean that they don't have super great critical thinking skills, which is one of the things you need to become part of the right. So, yeah, makes sense to me. Can you prevent people from not being interested in socialism by making it harder for them to study it at university? I think so. I think that is one of the reasons why they do it as well. The idea that like everyone thinks like, oh, you just go to university to become socialists, all the kids go there and become corrupted is a powerful idea in the Western mind. And yeah, like there is a pretty negative perception of like social science and humanities professors and their like, corrupting influence on the youth. And so if somebody goes to university, you want them to go for like engineering because, there's no politics and numbers and stuff. So go do that. So yeah, I definitely think that there is an anti-left program within also the sort of like financialization of universities. Myers-Briggs tests are always funny. I've taken like 6 of them, and I feel like I've gotten a different answer every time I've taken one, which is, that's the sign of a good test. All right, what we got next? Do you think that will work in the long run? No, because I also think that socialism is powered by a lot of it'll definitely hurt the left in the short term, because in our current moment, the left really only, because of like the Cold War and everything like that, the left has been largely destroyed in most spaces except for the academy. But in the long term, like, the problems of capitalism are just going to keep getting worse. And at some point, you'll have to do left-wing activism that is outside of, the university and in areas that are, workplaces and stuff like that, like we did in the olden days. So it's just a kind of attack on the like post-1960s left, which is less concerned with class politics, mostly because it was made up of people who were well-to-do enough that they could go to university, and the people who got highly educated, especially in fields like the humanities and the social sciences, because, it meant that you were at least not in a position where you had to take a profitable degree in order to have like a real career, if that makes sense. Or at least to be the perception that you needed to get a degree that led to a real career. Because actually, you can do like a philosophy degree or a history degree and stuff like that and have a very successful career. It's just that people don't think that way. Yeah, I mean, someone just said public universities are all about anti-communism, especially in economics, and business. Yeah. I mean, the fact that universities teach economics, which is a more or less theology for capitalism, is it says pretty much everything, doesn't it? Like, I always think of economists as the bishops and priests of the current religion of the world, which is, the worship of the free market and capitalism and all that kind of stuff. And that, like, if you read a lot of economists, they sound more like theologians than they do like, serious social scientists, because they're not really doing much beyond like just going out in order to they have a priori belief in a certain type of economic dogma, and they go out trying to prove that their assertion is correct. All right. Next question we got here is from Heidi. The question is, I've always been told that anarchism is when there's no government. I've read about it and I still can't grasp it. Honestly, would like to know how it would work. Are there any leaders or representatives in that form of governing? Really enjoy your videos and trust your research and honesty, and I would like to learn more about it. Well, Heidi, I don't know if you're here, because I don't think you responded to the last time I answered one of your questions. But if you are here, and this is a question I get a lot from a lot of people in my life, including my wife, so this is a good one to answer. Yeah, anarchism is... there's a couple ways I can answer this. The first one is that anarchism as a philosophy is really against overall totalizing solutions to all problems. And anarchists typically don't think very much in the realm of theory. They are more interested in practical application and doing things. So in some ways, the idea of like, well, how do you organize the world if you don't have states? The first anarchist answer you can go with is, I don't know. We got to figure it out. we got to try it to figure out what's going on. We got to figure it out as we go. Because a lot of anarchists would say, like, you can theorize about how a society would function until you're blue in the face, and it's going to mean nothing unless actually go and try things. And so a lot of anarchists would say that the real solution to the problems that we're having don't have answers because we haven't tried stuff yet. And that really our best hope is to have a lot of different experiments trying new and different things, and then see it, and then finding what works and building upon that. That's how anarchists have always done things. Anarchists have spoken less about having these totalizing theories about how to organize every facet of society, and more about having some general principles and then being like, okay, well, we'll start here and go from there and see what happens. Which I know that for a lot of people who really, they've spent their entire lives under the domination of an overarching state authority that basically dictates everything that they can and can't do. That is kind of scary, because there is a lot of scariness and uncertainty and the idea of like experimentation and such. Anarchist theory is, yes, it is definitely a thing. It's just, there is a, even in anarchist theory, there is the heavy emphasis on praxis as a form of social change and of, building the society that we want to make. Now, that being said, there has been a whole lot of, theorizing about ways to do things, and there has been a lot of practical experiments in trying to do things. For example, there is like there's an anarcho-communist, structure to a lot of informal social authorities. If you are hanging out with a group of friends, 5 of your friends, you don't have a designated leader who has absolute authority over everybody else. You probably don't have you probably make decisions like, where are we going to go for drinks tonight, or what do you guys want to do? Probably don't make that in a top-down authoritarian manner. You make, consensus decision-making and all that kind of stuff. And furthermore, you probably, when you guys are like, sharing something or like that, you probably have a relatively equitable distribution of stuff. Because, to not act in those kinds of fashions is kind of a dick move. It's just that, once we get to a certain level of abstraction, when you're trying to figure out a way to govern larger groups of people, that we somehow just move away from that kind of thinking and go towards thinking, oh, no, giving a few people absolute authority is actually good now. And I don't like that. And so an anarchist would say that we need to find our way to work out our organizations in life, our the daily ways that we make everything function, in the most anti-authoritarian and the most the least hierarchical anti-authoritarian way possible. Sometimes there's a whole thing about there is a whole thing in like kind of anarchist discourse that says like it's not like there's no such thing as authority. You don't like my idea of epidemiology is not as valuable as a doctor's, for example. There's this whole thing, I think it's like leave like when it comes to the making of boots, trust the bootmaker, that kind of a thing. And that there is like there's a lot of the anarchist ideas about the illegitimate use of force, and there is like legitimate uses of coercion and force, like stopping somebody from hurting another person, or pulling a toddler, or like grabbing a toddler who's trying to walk into a crowded street. Like these are not irrational hierarchies and authorities. So then the question becomes, what does a world look like organized in the least hierarchical and most democratic fashion that you can? And there's a lot of different ways of thinking about different things. There's a lot of different things that people have tried. There is communes, for example. Small communities that are organized around sort of consensus decision making and a non-hierarchical organization structure. Sometimes it's done. Sometimes, if you need representation, you can do things through sortitionism, which is where you, instead of like electing representatives, you sort of do like a lottery for people to hold the positions of authority, and have them on limited terms, so that the amount of authority that any one person holds is not for a super long time. And that, through contracts and things like that, people enter into agreements and stuff like that with different levels of communes. Furthermore, these communes and organizations are almost definitely going to need to be highly interwoven with other communes and organizations, because we live in a global, complex, high-tech society, which means that the things that you are a member of is going to be a very complex web of different contracts and agreements and organizations. Probably like, a mix of like local communes and more regional resource allocation systems, and probably greater global projects, all things that you as a commune have, agreed upon being members of. And if you don't like something about the way that the thing works, unlike a state, you have the choice to opt out. Because a lot of the problems like that people have with states is that, or anarchists have with states, is that you're born into a country that has all of this authority over you, and you have really no way to opt out. So what that would look like, what kinds of organizations, what kinds of agreements could make a city function, could make a continent function, could make a world function, are big question marks, because we haven't tried a whole lot of them, but there are some places we can look to find answers. Like, for example, in the Middle Ages, this is, I think, in Kropotkin's book Mutual Aid. In the Middle Ages, there was, in cities, in big cities, there wasn't really like a city government. There wasn't like a city authority. Things were organized by different neighborhoods sort of taking care of themselves and coordinating and agreeing upon things and all that kind of stuff. And it was messy, and yeah, there were problems, but it did work. There were cities, they did exist. They did have things. So there's maybe not like a perfect model to follow in that, but there is at least an example that this kind of, organizational structure doesn't immediately fall apart under a little bit of scrutiny. Hopefully that's as good as answers I'm going to come up with. So I hope that was good. Remember the anarchist guy after the revolution who said he was happy when the U.S. broke because it allowed different regions to set up different kinds of societies without U.S. government destroying them? Do you have sympathy for that optimistic attitude to social collapse? I mean, specifically about the United States, a little bit. There's something to be said about, like, if America, the global empire, kind of fell apart, that the rest of the world would have a lot more freedom to explore different ways of governing themselves, specifically on the left. Because, yeah, like, I don't know if Canada could have a really, like anything beyond, like, a very minor social democratic leader. Like, if we got any more radical than, like, the NDP, if we elected, like, a democratic socialist government, I have a feeling that whoever leads that would end up committing suicide by being shot in the back 6 times. And there's a lot of countries in the world that have had their, people's-led movements to overthrow capitalist dictators thwarted by the CIA. And so there is something to be said about, the U.S. specifically collapsing as a global empire would allow for some more breathing room for different movements around the world. The only problem is that there are definitely wolves in the waiting who are ready to take the crown and title themselves as world emperor when the U.S. starts to wane, specifically in, like, Beijing and in Moscow. Should take a section of the stream and make a separate step back video out of it to help others better understand anarchism. Is a pretty good definition. Well, thank you. I have it has been sitting on my list of video ideas to make, so maybe. I think like the in the idea document it was like how anarchism works, because apparently people need it spelled out, or people really need every aspect of it spelled out for them, type thing. And that's like, okay. The world would have less food if the U.S. collapsed. That is true. The U.S. does produce a shit ton of food. Isn't anarchism when you live on a stolen bucket wheel excavator? I mean, that too. To this day, Japan and South Korea are American puppet states, yeah. I suspect a lot of European nations will be like, whoops, no America to defend us now. Better take money out of welfare to fund the army. Yeah. Alrighty, let's see what we got next. Why didn't Canada develop a more federal or unitary government? Mostly because they were trying to wrangle together a group of very different and disparate colonies that had very different regional identities and very different cultures and even different languages. So if you're going to make an entity that contains not only like Ontario and British Columbia and Alberta, but also Quebec and Newfoundland, you're going to have a fairly decentralized country come out of that. There's also the fact that Canada and this was more of an issue in the past, but still, that was when they were thinking of all the big ideas about how the country would look. Canada is a very, very big country where our population centers have big vasts of seas of nothing between them. And so regional authorities would have to have more authority because, there's some like what's it called? There's some very remote locations. All right. And what we got next? How is the Bloc Québécois able to recover from the 2010s? That's an easy one to answer. Racism. There's not much more to the answer than it was racism. The U.S. or what's it called? The NDP did very well in the 2011 election in Quebec, which, to be honest, was a bit of a fluke. And then in the 2015 election, the Bloc Québécois had a little bit of gains, but not very much. The Bloc Québécois was still a very small party after the 2015 election. Where they made gains was after the NDP switched its leadership from a guy by the name of Thomas Mulcair to a person by the name of Jagmeet Singh. And in a province that is basically trying to make it illegal to be Muslim or illegal to be South Asian, a place where not like in 2019, they were trying to pass, it was 2018, they tried to pass a law that would make it illegal to wear a turban while working in the government, or illegal to wear a hijab and work as a public employee. You can imagine that then when the leader of the Social Democratic Party becomes a turban-wearing Sikh man, that a lot of Quebec's pernicious aspects when it comes to racism came to the front, and a lot of those like kind of left-leaning racist type voters decided to revert back to the Bloc Québécois, because the Bloc Québécois, even though they're not super left-wing in their leadership, have a sort of reputation of being more left-wing than they are, I guess. Am I right in thinking Canada was just created because white people thought some country had to fill up the rest of North America? Kind of. Canada was made specifically because the British Empire wanted to grab up the western, the sort of prairie provinces, which were, indigenous territory. They didn't want to take that away, mostly because they were concerned that if they didn't, the United States would. So they wanted to counter American expansion by making because according to the agreement they signed in 1814 with the U.S., they were entitled to that land, but Americans, they were worried that the Americans would just start expanding into that territory. So in order to facilitate Western expansion and to facilitate the sort of like knitting together of these sort of colonies on the West Coast and the colonies on the East Coast, they made Canada into a dominion so that it could sort of build itself together. But in a lot of ways, Canada's identity is founded in a coalition, a sort of confederacy to counter the United States, because they were still concerned about America invading Canada at some point. To be fair, or to be honest though, the United States hasn't gone to war with Canada since 1814, so it's not really a founded, worry, but that was the thinking. I am curious more about why they chose to go with a Dominion. I had to figure out the answer to that one, though. I don't exactly know why they decided to give some of their colonies, like, partial independence. My guess is that the costs of managing them was too high or something, I don't know. You went to Loyalist College, thus named for being loyal to the crown rather than rebels of America. Yeah. There's, if you take any Canadian history class, the first thing you learn is that the creation of the Canadian state is sort of, in some ways, born out of the American Revolution, as well as, the American Revolution is almost responsible for the creation of Canada as an identity just as much as the U.S., because essentially Canada became what was left over of British colonies after the war. And it also meant that a series of colonies that at that point were predominantly French got a huge influx of British colonists, and the sort of hybrid French-English identity sort of had to be grown out of that. So, and the American Civil War, yes, because Canada and the U.S. had Canada and the U.K. had different. While they didn't, I don't think any of them actually contributed to the American Civil War. Canada and the UK did not see eye to eye on the Civil War. Canada being very building its identity on being very anti-slavery, getting into several diplomatic incidents with the U.S. over basically being the end of the Underground Railroad for a good while in America. That it led to big that Canada was very Union sympathetic, and the UK, because they wanted to keep a balance of essentially cotton prices, were basically waiting to see if the war would end before their cotton reserve ran out to intervene on behalf of the Confederacy. So that is definitely part of the story as well. Although instead of helping the Confederacy, instead they just developed cotton plantations in India and Egypt. So that was really their answer. And so by the Civil War happening, the South actually lost because now there was so much more competition that they basically lost their sort of king cash crop. Please ignore the Canadian slaves we had at one point. Yes, Canada did have slaves at one point. It was a practice that was ended very early. If I remember correctly, in Upper Canada, which is what would become Ontario, slavery practice was ended by Governor John Simcoe, who was the first governor. So it was very early on that it happened. Not that there's any excuse for slavery, obviously, just that it was a thing like that, well before, I think even before the U.S. got independence. That a lot of Canada had banned slavery. I believe the Trent crisis with the UK and Confederacy diplomats getting their ship Trent being captured by the US is one of the biggest reasons the US saw the UK as needing to hand over Canada. I don't know much about this. Governor John Simp. Oh boy. That's a little bit of Canada history for you guys. What else we got going on, everybody? I have run out of questions. I guess I can go check the Google form, see if anyone's submitted something. Let's see. A couple. Let's see. I know a lot of communists like to lean into the Soviet Army's efforts in beating the Nazis in World War II, but seem to miss the fact that the USSR collaborated with fascist governments for their own gains in the years leading to the invasion of Poland, how the how the Soviets still used high-ranking Nazis for their rocket program, and in the GDR security forces. Is this leftist trying to counter right-wing communist lies about the USSR and Nazi Germany being equitable, or is it historical revisionism? I mean, the things you said are not incorrect. And yeah, to a lot of people who are really invested in defending the Soviet regime, these are very inconvenient. So, yeah, you're not... I think that in many ways there is a, in leftist circles, especially in kind of like the past, not so much now, but like before, like especially during the Cold War, I guess, there is a reflexive defense of the Soviet Union, because it was regularly a punching bag used to discredit all leftist ideology. So, yeah, trying to, like, defending the Soviet Union kind of became part of, like, defending the leftist cause. And that is a problem. I warned you about states. Could Hawaii have continue to exist as an independent nation into the modern day, or would the nation's small size and location make annexation by some empire in the Pacific inevitable? I mean, it's hard to say what's inevitable, but an indigenous kingdom in the Pacific, especially at a time when there was a lot of interest in conquering these Pacific islands for growing, like, sugar and stuff like that. Yeah, I think that if it wasn't the U.S., some imperial power probably would have started to fuck with Hawaii. I mean, the reason why Hawaii, like, Hawaii already had some sort of imperial connections already before the U.S. got involved. Not very fond of the USSR, but I still need to explain sometimes the USSR wasn't all breadlined and gulag. Yeah. People take basically the worst things that Stalin did and then say that explains that is the entire Soviet Union, and then use that to discredit an entire left wing of politics. Where's the line for people who aren't citizens of a nation to comment on something? I know nationalists will often tell people from other countries to butt out regardless of the validity of their statements, but I've noticed a tendency from people in the global north to say X should annex Y or X should declare independence from Y, with little more than a vague understanding of history or events on the ground. When should we know when to keep our thoughts to ourselves, or at least realize that our stake in this situation would largely amount to make map go change, and people who actually live there might disagree? Good question. Because, yeah, I hate map go change people. Because as somebody who lives in a country that has a nation within a nation, that a lot of just randos on the internet just think an entire province should get independence because it would make map go change and therefore would be good, despite the fact that it would be a disaster for everybody involved, yeah, it's a simplistic understanding of a culture from one that they don't actually, they're not actually part of and don't know the nuances of. So yeah, do I know of a line specifically of when that becomes appropriate or inappropriate? No. The only thing I can think of is when there is popular demand by the people who live in a region to do something like get independence, or to have, or to like, change borders in some way. Then those people. But like, in many ways, best not to comment on things that you don't really understand the context of what's going on. Which anarchist project do I feel is more successful? The Black Army of Ukraine or Revolutionary Catalonia? Probably Catalonia. Catalonia is more well remembered, and I think people are more sympathetic to the anarchists of the Spanish Civil War than to like the Machinists. We had a Wexit Party candidate in our riding this year. Oh boy, somebody lives in Alberta. Whew. But yeah, there's like definitely a difference between like, people who are trying to say that, Quebec should get independence to me. And despite the fact that, separatism is like at a multi-generational all-time low in the province right now. But like, then don't comment on places like the West Sahara, a group that the indigenous people very much want to be independent from Morocco, but we don't talk about that. How come cats and dogs are so gendered? Like, I distinctly remember in high school people acting like real men only like dogs and cats are a women's thing. And even in adulthood, there's often a gendered association with owning a cat or dog. Where does this come from? That's a good question. My guess is that dogs are more of a thing that you do, that are more associated with more traditionally masculine activities, like, dogs can be used for work. They can they go outside and run around and get dirty and like that kind of thing, and that cats are clean and more indoor and domestic, and I guess that probably is why. That's just me guessing though. Would it be better if regular people, i.e. non-experts, weren't allowed to read the results of preliminary medical studies? So I think we've also patterned by now. Some researchers does a study that shows some drug might help prevent COVID. Actual scientists don't get too excited because they understand the results of studies like that are basically worthless until they've been replicated. Scientists don't get excited, but vaccine skeptic Karens sure do. They find these studies when looking for vaccine alternatives. They share them with each other, and then they all go out and take whatever drug was in the study instead of getting the vaccine. Inevitably, a whole lot of unvaccinated boomers die of COVID or ODing on the drug in the study. Would it be better if there was some gatekeeping mechanism that prevents regular people from being able to read scientific studies like this? Like, suppose the results of a medical study haven't been replicated a certain number of times, and only experts in the field, i.e. people who know their job, are allowed to know about it. What would be better? I mean, in some ways, I can see like the argument you're trying to make there, but also information being locked into intellectual silos is also kind of worrisome. But this is older than COVID. Like, there has always been like some promising science comes out of one study about something, and then grifters will use that to attach scientific, language onto all sorts of wacky things that could have nothing to do with anything. That's been around forever. And in many ways, I think this is going to have to be an education thing, which we have to be a little bit... First of all, scientific studies or scientific journalists should have a little bit more should probably there's definitely something some ethical issues with the way that science journalists report on these kinds of stories. That is the case. But like also we definitely like this is also an issue of like, you know, lacking scientific literacy and lacking an idea of knowing how the scientific process works. And that is a problem. Like, yeah, science, like, what's it called? There is already too many barriers in the form of like paywalls and institutional walls and stuff like that between science and the general public. The fact that the only people who can report on it are people who have enough money to read these articles is a big deal. The other thing, too, is that the reason why it's happened so much with COVID is because one of the things that's going on with COVID specifically is they've sort of put up this, a lot of journals are putting up preliminary research, like very early stuff, because they're trying to develop the science of COVID as fast as possible. So sometimes they release things that are not yet peer-reviewed, but they look like they're pretty promising and that kind of stuff. Is this more reason we need to teach people critical thinking in schools and universities? For sure. Definitely. Sorry for the out-of-the-butt question. What's my opinion on SFIA with Isaac Arthur? Did you guys talk? Yeah. I did a stream with him once. And he did a quote from my Ancient Aliens video. So, yeah. I like his channel. It's fun. It's cool stuff to look at. I like that Isaac Arthur is willing to entertain pretty much even the most silly ideas, and then it's just like, well, this is ridiculous, but I'm going to look at all the physics here and see what we can get. This is Echo Baz. Oh, hello. Oh my, there's a very angry blue jay outside. Love blue jays. Yeah, they're very pretty, but they're also very loud. They basically scream instead of making bird sounds. Are you worried about your new podcast attracting edgy atheist comrades? Maybe. I don't know. The thing about the podcast is that I try very hard to not be a dick. And once you actually like listen to the podcast, which should be coming out in a week or so. No, not a week. A little bit more than a week. Yeah, 8 days from now, the first episode of our new podcast comes out. It's probably not aliens, with me and Scott Nicewander. But one of the things that's kind of like part of our podcast terms of values or whatever is about not being dicks, which means that we don't really trample on people's religious beliefs unless there's something about aliens involved with it, and we don't. Except for the Ancient Aliens people who have been very dishonest, we try to not be dicks to people for, say, believing in UFOs or believing in these kinds of things, because, yeah. Where will it be? Scott's taking care of most of the behind-the-scenes stuff. I'm more of the research guy. But my guess is that it'll be on, like, you know, all of the major podcast platforms, like, you know, iTunes and maybe Spotify, I don't know. Wherever you find podcasts. And maybe at some point I'll probably see about trying to get it on YouTube in some fashion, so I should show you guys the album art while we're here. Why not? We got 10 minutes left. But I've got some pretty cool album art for this podcast that I can show you guys. So, Scutch. Anyone who doesn't know Scutch, Scutch is a very talented artist. He drew the album art for the podcast. So let me just get that open. So this is the album art. And as you can see, pretty cool drawing. It's gonna be pretty fun. Is the problem with something like Ancient Aliens that debunking everything on an episode takes longer than the episode? Like, there's a YouTube debunking the first episode and it's almost 3 hours long. Yeah. We have recorded, I think, like 15 or 16 episodes of this podcast, and I think we're in episode 2. So, yeah, I definitely feel that. The other possibility, too, with this podcast is just given where things are going, is that if they like it, it might end up being a Nebula podcast, which means there might be exclusive content on Nebula. We'll see, but that's not something that's of any confirmation. It's just something that we're like, well, maybe. Is the first episode out now? No, it comes out on October 5th. Was Ancient Aliens even the first major push? Stargate kind of pushed the same theory. No, Ancient Aliens really took off in a... what's it called? Ancient Aliens really took off based on a 1968 book by Eric von Daniken called Chariot of the Gods. And it got really big in like the New Age movement in the 1970s, which also was sort of like the beginning of like the UFO subculture. So it was sort of born in that. What if iHeart reached out? That'd be pretty cool. I could use a paycheck to make podcasts. Please no exclusivity Nebula contenting. I mean, I would not have the entire podcast behind a paywall, but the occasional exclusive episode where we do something special, maybe, but I don't know what that would be. I don't know how it works. This is just me spitballing, and that, what's it called? It's not even nothing. Why do people associate New Age movement with the left? Because in many ways they are the new left. They are the kind of post-class politics left. Because that's what left wing looked like for baby boomers. Hence why it wasn't very strong, and they all just became right wing conservatives. And I could go on Behind the Bastards. I have a feeling that I would never end up on Behind the Bastards because it's typically they want comedians, right? They want people who are funny to bounce off of Robert. So I don't think I'm going to end up on Behind the Bastards, despite the fact that that would be a major, like, W in my books. But, man can dream. Real talk, was the show Ancient Aliens the CIA experiment on how to administer widespread misinformation? Interesting theory. I don't know. Calling everything a psyop is also a bit of a... I think that is... It's a bit of like left-wing conspiracy theory routes that's not very productive or constructive to much of our movements. I'm not a big person on saying that if a bad thing happened, a CIA did it, because I feel like that's very overly simplistic. You don't like Von Daniken, his work is bad. He's also like absurdly racist. And there's like a lot of like Nazi shit that's like just under the surface of all the Ancient Alien stuff. Was the new left a mistake? In some ways it was bad, but in other ways it was the only form of the left that survived sort of the McCarthyist purges of all of like organized labor and stuff like that. So in some ways, it's not so much a mistake as it is a mutilated shadow of what the left used to be. Because it basically got rended of all of the parts of it that were actually threatening the status quo. Do you think people who wrote Stargate were aware of how racist the concept is? Probably not. They just thought, cool, Egypt, portal. Was anime a mistake? Most definitely. Yeah, I think this Thursday we're recording an episode, and I'm doing it on Akhenaten because there's a ancient aliens theory that Akhenaten was alien hybrid, which is fun. What do you mean with the New Left? The New Left is a term for kind of a post-1960s left. Basically when, this is sort of very America-centric, but basically when baby boomers, like where the left was basically purged of having any presence in organized labor, and the only place where left-wing politics really survived was in educated boomers who, because they did not grow up with, like, you know, they didn't work, they didn't really have a class politics, so their left-wing activism was more rooted in like social justice movements and civil rights movements rather than like solidarity and class and worker-based movements, which is kind of like why the New Left is now referred to like left-wing people who are more concerned with things like, you know, civil rights and anti-racism and those kinds of things than like, you know, challenging capitalism and the sort of systemic issues that create things like racism and all of the prejudices of society. Akhenaten's the one who tried to make Egypt monotheistic. Yes, that is correct. Do I address that real aliens aren't going to be like humanoids that we can interbreed with? For sure. Yeah, that is something I'm going to be talking about. What could someone do to stop Japan's massive purity complex problem? I don't know. Hope that people in Japan... I don't call those people the New Left. I call them liberals. Yeah, the New Left is sort of an outdated term. It's sort of a word we used before the 2015 Democratic primaries showed that there is very little left in the liberal camp. So... But like in America, like still to a lot of Americans, liberal is just the term they use for anybody who is not a conservative. So it's still, you know, a problem. Also, don't we have his mummy? We're not sure. We have a mummy that might be him, but we're not 100%. We have a mummy that is a man that is... somehow related to Tutankhamun, because we have Tutankhamun's mummy, but we aren't really sure if it is if the genes are close enough that it is his father or if it's a uncle. So, if I remember the high Egyptian curator in Cairo is pretty convinced that it's Akhenaten's mummy, but they're not sure. Like, he didn't have any name tag on him. There was no, because he was buried in his like city that he made called Akhetaten, which was then abandoned. So they took his sarcophagus and they left his sarcophagus. I think was raided, but his mummy was taken to the Valley of the Kings. So they don't have a name on it, so they don't really know who it was. And there was also quite an effort to like try to erase Akhenaten from history. So we don't it's really hard to tell if it's him or not. But so the answer is maybe. All right, everybody. It's 2 o'clock. I've got stuff to do today, so I gotta go record a video in a little bit. So let's see. I'm going to raid. Let's raid left flank vets. Why not? All right, everybody. Been a real thing. I'm sorry that I'm going to be gone for so long. The next Step Back stream is going to be on for anybody who wasn't here at the beginning of the stream, the next Step Back stream is going to be on October 12th because I'm going out of town. I've got in-laws visiting and stuff like that. So, and there's Thanksgiving and everything. So I'm going to be away for a little while, but I'll be back on October 12th. And yeah, take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Be good. And I'll see you on the other side.